Hey, what is going on you guys? It's Epic here and welcome back to another video on the channel. A long time no see, but we've got a great one for you today. This is going to be the first of two videos which I'm going to be releasing on the worst and the best features in every Borderlands game. I asked you guys what you thought the worst features are in every Borderlands game over on my Twitter at EpicNNG if you want to go and follow, and I took a long hard look at what everybody had to think, and then I made my own minds up based on this on what I would compile for every game. Now, let me just say that if these videos do well, we will do more of these in the future, going over more things we don't discuss in these videos. But for my own personal rankings, I'm going to have one main talking point for each game, and then we are also going to be going over some side points that I know people are going to want me to talk about. And yeah, hopefully I don't make people too mad. I didn't want to really go for the low-hanging fruits, so hopefully you think the picks that I've got are a lot more unique, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoy. Let's get right into this video, and we're going to be starting off with Borderlands 1. Now, I do want to say, before I mention what my complaint is for Borderlands 1, I couldn't actually get the game to run for some reason. It kept crashing on my PC. And so because of that, I'm just going to be showing the Borderlands 1 trailers, and hopefully you can connect the dots. We'll move on really fast here. But Borderlands 1, for me, the biggest complaint I have to have is without a doubt that all of the maps in the game feel like they are built around the idea that you will be traversing them with a vehicle, or at least most of the maps. Of course, you do have side maps like the Lost Caves or even Scat Gully that do not have vehicles in them. But for the bigger maps, it just feels like if you're not using a vehicle, there's really no point in being on foot, right? Unless you're just picking up some loot or fighting a unique boss, which of course requires it. But I do think that this actually kicked off a bigger issue in Borderlands because later games also kind of went down the same route. Like, there are a lot of large maps in Borderlands 2 that also have that vehicle feel to them and just feel kind of empty without them. And of course in Borderlands 3, this is also an issue too. One of the praises that I would actually give to Tiny Tina's Wonderlands is that they removed vehicles, and I thought the game felt a lot better due to this. It was actually one of the more commendable things about that game. And with Borderlands 4 coming up at the time of recording this video, I'm actually not looking forward to vehicles returning at all, because I do prefer maps that are just a lot more fluent on foot, as opposed to almost feeling like they require a vehicle. So that's my pick for Borderlands 1. I know a lot of you wanted me to pick stuff like the 4 damage, or for example, the weapon system, or the aiming system, for example. But I will say, in most cases going forward, I do also just want to mention that I think the lack of a feature doesn't make it a feature, if that makes sense. Like, I think, for example, the maps being designed around vehicle transportation is a feature because they designed it with that intent. But I feel like a game not having access to a certain mechanic because it just wasn't made at that time doesn't really, doesn't really qualify for the worst feature thing. But anyway, let's move on to the next game, and we're going to go in chronological order here with Borderlands the pre-sequel. Now, I know that the low-hanging fruit for Borderlands the pre-sequel is going to be the oxygen, or the double jump system, or the low gravity system, but I have to say these are low-hanging fruits, and I think removing that feature from the game just removes its entire identity. So it doesn't even feel right to say that's the worst feature to me. It just feels like a low-hanging fruit, and in my opinion, like, if you don't enjoy the low gravity or oxygen system of a game set on the moon, it just feels a little pointless to critique it instead of just simply saying that this game is not for me, right? So, thinking of what I actually dislike about Borderlands the pre-sequel in terms of features and the way the game was designed, and things where I feel like they may have cut corners to save time or save budget, and maybe these things didn't get as much love as they deserved, it has to be the unique weapon innovation. Now, while we are chronologically talking about Borderlands the pre-sequel, as it does in the storyline come before the events of Borderlands 2, it actually in the real world released after Borderlands 2, and I believe had a smaller budget as well and was made by a smaller team. Although feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. But regardless, it did release after Borderlands 2, and it did reuse a lot of assets from Borderlands 2, including weapons and items. For this reason, a lot of the items in Borderlands the pre-sequel, at least in the base game without the Claptastic Voyage DLC, are just Borderlands 2 items, like the volcano becomes the magma, or the Unkempt Herald becomes the 88 Fragnum. And so because of this, you do end up with a game which feels like there's less meat and potatoes in the biggest part of it being the loot system, because it is a looter shooter, and I think that kind of hurts the game. I don't think it's the end of the world, but I do think it stopped pre-sequel from landing on its own 2 feet a lot easier. And it's, for me, one of the biggest issues in the game, I feel. Now, to their credit, some of the items, like I said, and basically all of the items are renamed, and some of them actually have, like, the new cryo element applied to them, which is really, really nice. And of course, because it's a different game to Borderlands 2, the balancing on the weapons feels kind of different also. So that's really nice, and they play differently off of the new characters and skill trees. So, alright, it's not the end of the world, but if we were going to pick the worst feature from pre-sequel, it would be that. Again, it's hard for me to say the worst feature from the pre-sequel is the lack of endgame, because that's not really a feature, it's more of a lack of feature, right? So I just don't think that really fits. Now, what I will say is I did see someone mention that they think the pre-sequel lacks pacing. It seems to slow down during the story a lot, and it just kind of comes to a hard halt, which means for multiple playthroughs through TVHM and UVHM, it just doesn't feel very fun to replay, and I can definitely echo that sentiment as well. But I could also just be very biased because I've beat the pre-sequel like 20-30 times, so don't really want to put that there as what I think is the worst. I just would like to throw that in there and say that I hear ya. Just for me, not the worst thing. The worst thing I think is actually in their loot system. Now, let's move on to Borderlands 2. This one is going to be a highly controversial category, and I've gone with something which I wouldn't say is not a low-hanging fruit, but I do think out of all the fruits to pick, it might surprise you which one I went with. Now, I had a lot of people mention that it was slag, or it was the multiple playthroughs, or it was the balancing, or it was Salvador even, right? But what I actually think is the biggest issue with Borderlands 2, and I'm going to be a little historian here, is OP levels. Now, OP levels, short for overpowered levels, is something that they added in eventually after the game's initial lifespan. It was in their DLC rotation they put in the game, and it added the raid on Digistruct peak endgame activity, which is basically a gauntlet that you clear without dying, and then you enhance your endgame level, in this case OP level, and you have to refarm all of your gear again. It's now much stronger, enemies are much stronger, it just scales the game to like 10,000. Now, what I will say is that I think OP levels are fun in terms of endgame. I think it's a fun concept. But the reason I didn't put slag on this list, and the reason I didn't put 3 playthroughs on this list, is because I think it's a byproduct of OP levels. I don't think that slag is anywhere near what people make it out to be if you remove OP levels from the equation. So why would I put slag as the biggest issue with Borderlands 2 when it's caused by the scaling of OP levels, right? Like, of course something like slag mechanically is going to end up being the best thing on the table in Borderlands 2 when OP levels are what they are and they demand what they demand. So for me, this is the worst part of Borderlands 2. It's an endgame system which, while fun, really squeezes a lot of the innovation and uniqueness out of builds, because of course you're just going to want to lock on to meta. Now, does this mean that Borderlands 2 doesn't have build variety and doesn't have item variety? No, it does not mean that. But I do think that OP levels did drastically change the foundation of Borderlands 2, and how you want to perceive that is up to you. I think they did it in a negative fashion, but I don't think it was the end of the world. I think the game is still a ton of fun with them. I just don't think OP levels in the grand scheme of things were needed, and I think Digistruct Peak would have stood on its own 2 feet a lot sturdier if it was just an endgame activity like the Proving Grounds in Borderlands 3. So that's going to do it for Borderlands 2, and let me know your thoughts on that in the comment section down below. I hope that's not too spicy. Now let's move on to the more current Borderlands 3. Now, I had to go predictable with this one because there is so much to talk about with Borderlands 3, and I'm not going to say it's the dialogue, I'm not going to say it's Ava, because again, this is just cheesy Twitter high school drama that people want me to get into so we can generate more clicks, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Ava's the biggest issue with Borderlands 3 because I'm above the age of 16, and I actually think the biggest issue with Borderlands 3 is the anointment system. Now, I will say I don't think the anointment system is useless. I don't think the anointment system has no fans. I don't think the anointment system didn't do good things for Borderlands 3. But I do think that if we were to wind back the clock, and even if we didn't wind back the clock, if I were to ask people in a survey, I think they would unanimously agree that regardless of their bias towards the anointment system, it did more damage than it did good to Borderlands 3 in terms of player reception. Now, of course, Gearbox are going to have more statistics on their ends and stuff that's more concrete on to say what they actually did for the game, but from player sentiment and my perception of them and perception of community reception, which of course will vary to player, which is why this is my list, I do think that a lot of people would tell you that anointments definitely harmed the game more than they hurt it. Now, when they first came into Borderlands 3, of course there was no way to reroll them. It made farming really bad, the pool was super bloated, and Gearbox did, to their credit, make a ton of adjustments to the anointment system. They also did later on add a reroll system, which made anointments a lot more bearable. But I do think that overall, anointments did need a lot of work to get to that point, and that doesn't mean that instantly lands them on this list. It just means it's clear that when they did arrive, they definitely hurt a lot of people's experience, and for players like me, I just don't want anoints in the game, period, and hope they don't return in Borderlands 4. So that's why I had to put them on my list, but let me know what you would pick for Borderlands 3 in the comment section down below. And now finally, let's move on to the last one, which for me is going to be Wonderlands, and it has to be for you as well, because it's the last game we are discussing. We're not going into the Tales games for this video, just the mainline games that people still play, right? Now, I had a very easy layup here. A lot of you wanted me to talk about the Chaos Chamber. A lot of you wanted me to talk about loot luck and its effect on the loot system. And while I think those are very good things that we could indeed talk about, and while I think that there are other shortcomings in Wonderlands, like their awful melee system, which we could make a separate video on, but I think I've been over that in the past anyhow, I actually wanted to focus on something with Wonderlands I think even Gearbox employees would agree with me on, and that is going to be the split screen system. Now, unfortunately, I cannot play split screen, so I cannot get you any gameplay of that. So in the background, please enjoy gameplay of Wonderlands Redux, which is incredible. If you have not played it already, don't mean to toot my own horn, but I'll blow it. And actually, I'm going to show you pictures of the split screen in Wonderlands instead, so you understand what I'm talking about. So for those of you that don't know, the split screen in Wonderlands has a major issue with UI. The UI is super broken in split screen. A lot of things just can't be readable. A lot of the menus just cannot be read. And you can see in the screenshot here, going through like a vendor to try and get some gear, it's like -0 information on what the actual information of the item is. You don't see what it is, you don't really know what it does unless you've got knowledge of the game. Split screen in Wonderlands is genuinely horrid, and I believe it also has major issues with crashing as well. Now, of course, it's hard for me to test these because I don't play split screen, but if you know, you know that the Wonderlands split screen issue has been ongoing since the launch of the game. No one was happy with it, but if anyone knows if Gearbox actually ever made any changes to it, let me know. But I had to put split screen on this list because to my knowledge it is still a problem, and I don't think they're ever going to fix it because, I mean, let's face it, they're done with Wonderlands at this point anyway. So didn't want to put something low hanging like loot luck on here. Wanted to give you a more out of left field, more interesting take here. I actually think that split screen is a big part of Borderlands regardless of if I use it or not, and I think Gearbox having it in the shape that it was in Wonderlands was really bad, and let's hope that when Borderlands 4 releases, it's in a much better state. But gamers, that's going to do it for my video on what I think are the worst features in Borderlands history through all of the games. Let me know what your personal list is in the comment section down below, and also the next video we're going to do is the best features in every single Borderlands game. So please leave your suggestions in the comment section down below, and if I take your suggestion, I will give you a little shout out in the video. Now, with that being said, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't already. This is going to be the #1 source for Borderlands content and everything British, I guess. So if you enjoyed this video and you want to be around for that, we'd love to have you here. So please hit that sub button. And with that being said, I will see you all later. Thank you so much for watching. Take it easy.